Welcome to the DePIN State presented by 𝐒𝐮𝐲. I'm Nik Hawks. On today's show, we have Ariel from Hivemapper. This episode is sponsored by 𝐒𝐮𝐲 Labs. If you're pushing the limits of what's possible on chain, you should build your own rollup with 𝐒𝐮𝐲. We'll have a little bit more on them later in the show. Before we get started, remember to hit the like and subscribe button. This alerts you to when the next episode drops and helps us keep bringing great guests like Ariel on the show. Ariel, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, good to see you. I think, by the way, you were the first person to interview me ever related to Hivemapper and or this incarnation of Hivemapper, I should say, in terms of what we're doing. So
yeah,
you discovered us very early.
It's always nice to come back on and see the updates. I mean, we were talking this time last year and it was a different landscape. And now we're talking here. Hivemapper is turning 1, if I'm getting this right.
Yeah. So we're coming up. And I remember we launched. And I think it was like the week after FTX blew up.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to talk about crypto.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted, everyone was like, the whole thing is dumb. Let's all go home.
Yeah. There's definitely been some bloody episodes in the past year, but you guys have done super well. You've got these pretty cool stats. It's 79 million road kilometers mapped. What else is going on out there?
Yeah. So let's see. So we're coming up on about 6% of the world's roads mapped. So we're right now a little under 6 million. We'll hit that probably in the next couple of weeks. And then, total, right? So we're constantly refreshing the roads as well. So I think we're at like 79 or 80 million. So really proud of that. I think the other thing that we're proud of is, and this is really all a testament to the community members, quite frankly, is that they're averaging roughly 900 kilometers mapped per week, right? And so I think that really speaks to it's not just something that people try once and then stop doing. It's no, these people are out there on the road. They're doing it consistently, week over week, month over month, because it not only is relatively easy to do, but it's also fun, right? In addition to the rewards and the honey token, I think people gain this sense of satisfaction of holy crap, I mapped this entire neighborhood, or I was traveling from here to here and I mapped 600 roads, and you kind of go look at that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been really fun and rewarding as well, is to see people just stick with it. And I've tried previous iterations of this, and our churn rates were just incredibly high, right? You try in addition to all the technical issues with an iPhone or Android device, when you try to map with it, you just have this tremendous amount of churn, right? Because people are I got to put the thing in, I got to take it out, and then they just kind of give up after a while.
Yeah.
A while being a month.
Yeah. And I've left mine in my, when I drive with my wife, I'll turn it on and she'll be like, oh, let's take a left here and go down this one road. It's not pink. I'm like, okay, it is kind of fun to figure that out. And then the thing I've noticed, and I think this seems to be true, is that people map the same place a bunch of times, which at first is oh, well, that's not that useful. But one of the core benefits of this thing is just how fresh the maps are.
Yeah.
So if I'm getting it right, it's everything on there on average is mapped 12 or 13 times. So you're just getting this constant update of super fresh maps, which is, if I'm getting it right again, that's kind of the offer.
Exactly. I think, a lot of people were like, oh, wait, there's nothing left to map. And I'm like, no. Even take the city of San Francisco now, I think it's almost 100% coverage. But there are now customers that are tracking very specific locations for really legitimate, good, use cases and business issues. And they're basically they need to see those places being refreshed, twice a week. Right.
Yeah.
And so, there's just a tremendous number of use cases where the frequency, could be even beyond twice a week. It could be 3, 4, or 5 times a week. And so I think, we're still educating our community on that, which is hey, look, once this area has been mapped once, that doesn't mean it's done and there's nothing left to do. Quite the opposite.
Yeah. It's nonstop. And that also brings up some pretty exciting news for you guys that you just started licensing data for paying customers. That's a really big step for a DePIN.
Yeah, it is. And, big brand names, hopefully we'll announce those names in the Q1 timeframe, but,
sure,
names that people would recognize as well. Right. And so I think, one of the customers actually did a small purchase in the early part of the year, saw the value, and then 5x their purchase So, and not insignificant numbers, right? We're not talking like just $1,000 or $2,000, like, real purchase orders here.
Right.
And so, it really speaks to all the work and the contributions of the community that they've done is like, okay, now people are taking Hivemapper seriously, right? This is like all of a sudden becomes a really viable, great data source. And now we announced the map features capability. So it's not just about imagery, it's about actually data. And we have some other things coming down the pipe on that side as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one of the cool things that I've seen with you guys is that, all these DePINs have this problem. And we were talking about this a little bit before, the supply and demand problem. So
yeah,
the supply side's pretty easy. People are super psyched to put these miners out there for the most part. The demand side is where a lot of these projects get tripped up. But you guys have done a pretty good job of figuring that out. Obviously, you got this paying customer. You also have the Hivemapper bursts, which are saying, hey, this is like specific demand for a place. Can you walk me through kind of what is going on there? I know there's been a bunch of announcements about it lately.
Yeah. So bursts solve a couple of key problems. One is a customer will come and say, look, you have coverage in a lot of areas, right? Some of that coverage we can use today. And so we'll just hit the API and pay for that coverage. Great. But other times they'll come and say, well, that coverage, either you don't have coverage there, and we would like to incentivize coverage there, right? By paying people a little bit more. So the way the bursts work is if the customer is willing to pay a little bit more for a very specific location, then they can do that. And then what happens is it shows up on the map to the driver, to the contributor. And then if they have a little bit of extra free time, they can go and say, okay, I'm going to make a right-hand turn here and map this area. I'm going to go do this neighborhood or whatever, right? And they earn a little bit of extra honey for doing that. Yeah. So getting back to the customer though, so there's a lot of situations where, they're looking for some, rural road or some, little town that hasn't been covered or whatever. So that's one. The other is they're trying to get it refreshed at a fairly high cadence, right? So they're looking for, hey, I need these, 500 locations across San Francisco and Chicago to be mapped 2 or 3 times per week. And so those bursts enable them to get, 95% coverage across those 500 locations. They don't necessarily need to do all locations, right? Like downtown Chicago or downtown San Francisco, probably there's enough just traffic drivers driving there. Yep. But if you go into the more residential parts of Chicago or into more residential parts of San Francisco, you may not get to the 2 or 3 times a week that you want. So a burst kind of gives that extra incentive. So it's very, very targeted. It's really cool to see it from our perspective, where those bursts go out there, and then literally like within minutes to hours, all of a sudden there's drivers driving around. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you guys have put them, I mean, they're all over the place. It's neat to see. So there's, I think, 1,100 regions that you guys have mapped now. There's a bunch of stuff in the US, San Francisco, obviously, but also Phoenix, Denver, Houston, Oklahoma City, Washington, D.C. I saw you're looking at stuff on the cities on the 40 West, the Interstate 40 West of Flagstaff. It's a lot of cities. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah. So. No, Arizona has been really important from so many different dimensions. There's some big customers who are obviously very interested in the state of Arizona. So they've been the big beneficiary of a lot of these bursts and a lot of the work that's been going on there. So, Arizona is also interesting because it's, as it's really hot there during the summer. Right. And so, and there's just a tremendous amount of change happening in the Phoenix metro area, like literally, new neighborhoods popping up, new roads popping up. And so it's also just a very challenging area to map because it's the amount of the extreme heat, and then B, the fact that there's so much change that's happening. So that's been a fun one on a lot of different dimensions.
Yeah, tons of action. I know every time I've driven through, I mean, as silly as it sounds, the state of Arizona, it's always like something is super new. So, all right, let's take a quick break and we'll talk about today's show sponsor, eclipse Labs. One of the cool parts about doing this show is we get to talk to tons of projects across the space, including back-end nerdy stuff that helps deepen projects. One of those is today's show sponsor, eclipse Labs. They are a customizable roll-up provider deploying app-specific chains for several DePIN projects. They allow you to pick your virtual machine, your base layer, and additional customizations to enable new functionality for your DApp. Eclipse is committed to helping projects build on DePIN. Check them out at eclipse.builders and check out the interview we did with Neil at Eclipse if you haven't seen it yet. So super cool stuff. Now you guys are on Solana, Ariel. I saw you guys had put out a only possible on Solana video pretty recently. I'll just put in the kind of softball plug there is how's the experience been so far?
People ask me that a lot, and, I don't get into all the, Ethereum versus Solana versus this other blockchain type of warfare that happens. The way I look at it is, we don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. If I was thinking about it a lot, like, that would be problematic. And I always tell Toli and Raj, I was like, the fact that I don't think about you guys a lot means that you're doing your job, right? It's very low cost. It's very reliable. It's fast when we need to be fast. So, what else could you ask for from that perspective? And it enables us to do our job, which is focus on building out great map products for amazing customers and helping them solve their problems. And so that's really where our attention and our focus ought to be, because that's what makes the entire thing go.
You want that thing to work. I mean, that's been another great success story, I think, in the past year, is that a year ago on Solana, they had to fight these accusations that it wasn't working all the time and it'd go down, and it's, you'd see graphs on Twitter. I haven't heard anything, I think, in the last year about that being a problem. It's like that conversation has switched quite a bit. And it's super cool. I mean, projects like yours where you need it up all the time, we're using it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Awesome. So you got this map AI trainer stuff. That's pretty exciting to see you guys just improving the AI side and making it so the whole thing is better and better. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and what's going on?
Yeah. So the dashcam provides us, geolocated, high quality imagery that is incredibly fresh. And some customers can use that data product, right? I mean, we have to do some processing on it as well, like to package it up in a way that customers can use it via a set of APIs. But what customers are really saying is, look, I need data. Like, in other words, I want to know whether or not this road is still open, right? I want to know whether or not this is a one-way road or a two-way road, right? I want to know what's the speed limit here. I want to know whether or not this is a construction zone or not, right? And so what Map AI is effectively doing is a pipeline where we have these AI trainers. They can contribute to the map they earn honey and so forth. And they're effectively training the AI to be able to identify all of those types of things. But it's not just about identifying it, it's about positioning it properly, right? I think this is a part that a lot of people get wrong, is if your stop sign or your speed limit sign, being able to just say, hey, that's a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit sign. Okay, that's like not the hardest thing in the world anymore. Being able to identify that's a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit sign and it's here, plus or minus half a meter, that's really tough. And so, doing that at scale across many different countries, many different regions of the world, that's the hard part. And that's really that Map AI trainer pipeline. We've been working really hard, right, over the last 7, 8, 9 months. There's been a lot of noise in crypto. We kind of just put our heads down and we're like, no, we got to build this thing out, because that's the thing that customers care about, more than imagery. Imagery is the raw data, but it's really the data that is the higher value data product ultimately.
I love it. I love seeing, companies like yours kind of figuring all this stuff out, putting all these different pieces together and saying, hey, here's kind of the better way to do things, better way to do business. The other thing that I think is super cool that you guys are doing is this connection, really deep connection with your community. You got 23,000, I think, contributors, just a little bit over 23,000. And I'm seeing that you guys got community rewards in Discord, like people are getting badges. And that's, it seems like sometimes that's a little bit silly, but it's also really cool that you're saying, look, we have this community. They are a part of what we're doing. Max and I talk about the community being an actual business unit for any of these businesses. You guys are really recognizing that and doing a good job of saying, hey, you guys are a part of it. How do we reward you beyond just the transactional token piece, which is, it's fun, but it's neat to see you guys recognizing the contributions of the community in other ways.
Yeah. And I think look, I think the Discord, obviously, like, people come there and they have questions and they have issues and they're trying to learn more about the project. I think that's awesome. That's great. Yeah. And there's also another side of the Discord where it's really just like entertainment. Like, you will find people on there at all hours of the night, just chatting and, giving each other some crap every so often as well. And so I think it just it's like a great community, and it's also just a form of entertainment for a lot of folks to poke fun and, talk about this and talk trash and whatever, all that stuff. And so I think, like any kind of big family, there's disagreements and there's, different perspectives, and, those are great, those help everybody understand what's going on in terms of, how we're all building this together. And I think finally the community is starting to see that there's, real customers with real use cases, and, they're starting to use the data, and they're starting to build the pipes between our two systems, right? Like, it's not just about going to the customer and explain to them like what the capabilities and the value is and the pricing and all that.
Yep.
There's this integration effort where all of those APIs need to actually be integrated with one another.
Yep.
That is really like the connective tissue that is incredibly important, incredibly valuable, and that we spend a lot of time on with customers. And so I think the community is starting to appreciate that and understand that. And it's not, I don't want to, we've had a good year, but this will take time, right, to get, hundreds of customers all integrated, right? Like it doesn't all happen immediately.
No, it's just cool to see you guys doing that. And I know that you're well known for making sure that internally in your team that they meet, and there's a really strong sense of community in any organization you're a part of. And it's just neat to see that kind of spread out into the larger Discord community. So good job.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, what else is going on? What's coming up at Hivemapper? What are you super excited about that's kind of coming next that people might not know to really pay attention to?
Yeah. So what's coming next? We talked about positioning, right? Like that is really, really tough to do that across, just look around the world every single day, utility poles and speed limit signs and lane definitions and lane markings. To do that level of precision from a positioning perspective is really, really tough. So there's going to be just a tremendous amount of things that we're doing behind the scenes to like consistently improve that. Next year, what we're focused on is more dash cams, not just from us, but from the community as well.
Okay.
So we're not ready to quite announce that yet, but that's definitely something that we're starting to focus on again. We're going to try to continue to bring the price of the dash cam down, right? Like we don't, people always accuse us of like making a shit ton of money off of the dash cams. Like the investment that we've made in totality, we've lost money, and that's okay. Like we don't,
that's part of it. Yeah.
We don't lose sleep over that. And these things are open source, and we'll continue to work with developers and manufacturers to go build, their own versions of these things.
Yeah.
So that's definitely going to be a focus of ours next year as well. I do think it's worthwhile talking about this question of like what we've really spent time on is making sure that we match supply and demand, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I think this is really important, for the entire DePIN community to be laser focused on this, which is if you're just out there just growing supply and that supply isn't very valuable, you're wasting time and energy and resources and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And so how can you be very targeted in terms of driving the supply that you need to then match ultimately the demand?
Yep. Yeah, it's a business. They got to match for sure.
And, I think there's like the days of, hey, let's get all excited because the supply is growing. It's like, to what end? For what?
Yeah.
And I think that's an area I know you and Max have done a good job of talking about that on Twitter and beyond. And I think there's just as an industry in the DePIN, if we're going to be taken seriously, like we have to focus on this. This has to be a metric that we all like look at and focus and say, okay, is this project actually doing a good job of matching demand, supply, or are they just growing for the sake of growing? From a supply perspective, that is.
Yeah. No, it's been fascinating to watch. I think we're seeing all these different projects try different things. Max has certainly done some of the stuff with staking and making sure that there's a signal for demand that can organically grow out of the community. You guys are doing the same kind of thing with Burst. So I think we're all figuring it out and doing a pretty good job of getting there. But I'm glad you're putting a point on saying, look, this is a business. It's one thing to have, the supply side, but it's not a business unless you have both sides. So super cool to see that you're focusing on that.
And like, I think you got to really, like, you know, if you're just starting off and you're like, you know, just, hey, I'm going to focus on supply, and you don't have, you know, 5, 10, 15 customers that you're talking to, right? I mean, look, they're not going to buy because there's nothing to buy. You know, you haven't stocked the shelves with product for them, but like, you got to be deeply engaged with them because you got to understand ultimately what they need, right? And so the specific technical capabilities that you're embedding into that supply have to be like very, very, very well understood way in advance. Otherwise, like, you could be generating a whole bunch of supply that is in the wrong regions if it's a GPS based, you know, regional thing, or just doesn't have the technical capabilities that customer group really cares about.
Right. And I think there's probably something else there as far as, you know, these DePIN projects are really interesting in the sense that they can create supply in places that there wouldn't have been supply and no one would have even thought to look for supply. And now there is a new feature, benefit, whatever you want to call it, capability that's there. And it's up to the founders to be really creative and communicative about saying, like, look, this never even existed before. Here's how we think you can use it. But to your point, talking to the customers, how do you think you could use it? How could we help you grow your business, whatever it is? I think there's some really cool conversations, you know, being had right now that we see some behind the curtains on. And in general, across the DePIN space, people really paying attention to this demand side and developing demand and doing the business development on that side. So super cool to see you paying attention to it.
Yeah. And so, like, I mean, look, Helium was and is like, I refer to that team as like, and Amir specifically as like the George Washington of the DePIN space, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think you were part of that, you know, early group of people who were really the pioneers.
Yep.
And, you know, I think they did a lot of things. I mean, clearly without them, there is no DePIN, right? Like, full stop.
Yeah.
And also, you know, there's some things that they did that I think if they had another shot at it, they would probably do differently, of course.
Of course,
like, somebody's going to look back at like what we did and be like, oh shit, you guys are idiots for doing X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
And so I think this, you know, now you're seeing this in mobile, right? Where they're just like super laser focused on specific geographies, you know, trying to build supply, trying to build demand in that, match those two in a very concerted way. And so there's just a tremendous amount of learnings that has, you know, just over the years accumulated within these DePIN projects. And I think you guys are doing a good job of kind of sharing these across the entire community so that entrepreneurs who are coming in, as well as to like, you know, VCs being like, hey, you got to understand, you know, how is that team matching supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't understand that, you know, beware.
Yeah. And I'll say, like, we did not pay you to say that. That whole mobile thing was something that was set up by Max. So I think that's one of the things that we're aiming to do with these companies that we come in and help is say, like, look, there were mistakes made that were unavoidable because as you explore something new, there's no way to make it, you know, get perfect right out of the gate every time. We can help you figure out and avoid a lot of those mistakes and really build in this way that, Ariel, you guys are doing a super good job of figuring out on your own. A lot of these projects don't have the same history that you and I and Max have, having been super early in Helium and seeing, you know, some of the stuff in the very early days, like, okay, it seemed cool at the time, but it actually didn't work out. Like, let's make sure that we as a community of kind of DePIN companies and consultants and the rest of it, make sure we help each other get through this next piece of it. So super cool to see kind of all that stuff going down.
I will add one thing just because we started off with talking about the bear market. And, you know, the FTX stuff, like, I actually think that it was better this past year as I look back on it, although incredibly painful, right?
Yep.
You're just grinding. People are yelling and screaming, you know, everything is negative. But I will say that from both a supply perspective as well as demand perspective, it's better to be building in a bear market, right? Like, imagine if there was like 100,000, you know, dash cams that we had to fulfill. That would not have been a good thing, right? No. We didn't need 100,000 dash cams, right, in year one.
Yeah, you need a breather, right? Yeah. So like to get your shit together and go for it. Yeah, totally.
And so, you know, we're still able to build like quite a bit of map here, right? The coverage that we've had is quite good.
Yeah.
We don't have 100,000, you know, dash cam drivers all over the world. And so I think it's actually benefited us in the way that like it has allowed us to grow on a much more mature and stable
Yeah.
where demand is matching supply, the capabilities are maturing, and so forth. Like if we had to deal with 100,000, I mean, I know that Helium had to deal with like 500,000 hotspots, right? That's a lot in a very, 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 very short period of time.
Yep.
And, undoubtedly that's going to create a lot of issues, right? And so I think that this bear market, in a lot of ways, the silver lining on it has been that you're dealing mostly with people who really believe in the project, that understand, okay, this is interesting. Maps are really important. They're really valuable. A lot of people use them. I drive a lot, and so forth.
Yeah.
And so they're more excited about what you're actually building and what you're actually creating together. So I think that's helped us actually in terms of the bear market. So although if you would ask me that, back in November of last year, I'd have been like, no way. But, it is a good silver lining.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do this again in November of next year and see where we are then. But Ariel, thanks a ton for making the time to come on. I know you're super busy. Really appreciate coming on and sharing not only what's going on with Hivemapper, but also this overview of what's going on in the DePIN space and helping other founders who watch this say like, okay, cool. Let me make sure I avoid some of those mistakes. So really appreciate you making the time, man.
Thank you. Thank you, man.